So here we are again, another day below freezing, and I do mean freezing. We're gonna have to plan this day out carefully. And that's always part of the challenge we face. How are we gonna use this really freezing cold day efficiently? We got a lot of projects underway, a lot of parts of the projects that we can work on, but it's really cold out here today. But I think the best thing to do every day that it's this cold is just have an extra cup of coffee. This is even cold for me. I always thought I was part Eskimo. I think I'm part old Eskimo. So before I even get started today with the day's work, I wanted to just give a little heads up to this is some really nice Bondo. Probably we're going to eliminate using anything but that. As soon as our little supply, we'll use it up on Bondo with garbage cans or something. Anyway, this is a good product. Now, because the weather's been so cold, I've been trying to do indoor stuff early and wait till it warms up just a little bit. Maybe even get it above freezing before we do some spraying. This is ready to spray though, but I do want to wait a little while. So one of the things I wanted to mention real quick, not make a big deal out of it, but when I worked for Ford Motor Company for almost 20 years, one of the jobs I had to do in the computer department was to schedule roughly 250 jobs for an 8-hour shift. And I got really good at scheduling and figuring out things like, well, this paint is drying, this can be sanded, and that can be done while that's drying, and the coffee can be boiling while you're digging an oil well. Well, it's funny, but that has served me well in the restoration, because here we have a choice today, and this is a significant thing. My part's dry in a couple days, 2 or 3 days up by a heating vent, so that clear can be sanded. Now that's an indoor job. While it's way below freezing, I can be doing that. Some of these jobs, I don't want to rush them. I want to have a perfect day for big jobs like this. But today, it's freezing cold. I can get some clear on that. In my mind, I'm doing this every morning, first thing, figuring out I can sand this down with some 1500 grit, get another coat of clear on that, see how that lays out. I could paint strip this. I try to lay out the jobs in my mind. What I can do next on every one of these jobs. Now, on Steve's job, it's going to be easy, because once it warms up, I'm just going to paint the white on the tank. That just needs to be tack ragged down. He was here last night, or yesterday, and we went over the paint job. He bought the paint. He was at Gavin's. We're ready to rock on this within the next week or so. All of the other things that we had fisheye problems with, they've all been resolved. We're down to the last thing. I worked on a fairing the other day. Now that fairing is going to be well, maybe a whole session of sanding and maybe another 2 or 3 coats of primer before I get all this set in. I don't know until I actually do it. But I know that on any day that it's freezing cold, it's always good to do the first part of the day inside. Now I'm using up on my job some of the older sandpaper that I have. I have come to appreciate the different brands and the difference in them. This is a sandpaper that I have had for many years, and I was sanding lacquer with it, model airplane videos, and this is turned out to be a very good choice, although I do want to try some other brands on this for doing the final clear. Now, I'm always experimenting with sandpaper, and we have found this brand, Rhino Wet. Mark actually was the one bought this the first time from one of his suppliers. We have a couple of different grits in-house. Steve is going to pick up a box or a pack of 400. We don't have any 400 yet, but I do have some 1200. This is left over from the days of when we were sanding a lot of lacquer, butyrate dope lacquer, and it's on every video too. This was the way of choice of doing that type of finish. However, modern finishes are a lot more flexible. And in this case, I could sand this part probably with 600, with 1000, with 1200, even with 2000. This would not be critical on modern paint. On older paint, it was critical. So in this case, I do have a bunch of this sandpaper left. I'm going to see if this is going to work. Now this is cured 2 or 3 days. I don't like to sand it the next day. What I'm sanding it for is there's dust in here, of course, it was fly paper for about an hour, but I want to get rid of the ridge lines. I don't want to be able, when I close my eyes, I don't want to feel anything. I just want that to be If you closed your eyes, you wouldn't know that stripe is there. Now, the routine on all wet sanding is to really keep the paper wet. There's a test I do right away, and I understand. I've been doing this over 50 years. I understand if you're using old acrylic lacquer or lacquer, the various finishes, everyone is different, but modern finishes are very, very forgiving. The only thing I've ever found that's a pain in the neck is you've got to wait for these finishes to dry so that I can do this operation. This is my test. It's been sitting up by heating vent a couple days, so we should be in good shape. If you were painting in California on a sunny day, you wouldn't have to check anything. It'll be dry in a couple hours. But now, I have no chewing gum on the sandpaper. Once I know I have no chewing gum, now I can be aggressive. I always like to do it a certain way. I like to do everything with a soft, hard block if I had really rough edges, then a soft block, and then the final thing is I'll take the sandpaper out, fold it back, and do the last little bit by hand. But by doing it by 3 steps, instead of trying to do it all by hand or all by a block, I've just made it easier. I've just saved some time. And in this case, I'm trying to kill an hour, hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours, till it gets above freezing out there, only for my own comfort. Now, a lot of times, and this is funny, and this happens all the time, if you have a part, say 2 days old, and you sand it, now, right now, I cannot find that line. You don't want to sand it anymore. Once that line disappears and you've got all the dust out of the part, you're pretty much done. There would be no purpose to sanding it down through into the primer. So, the rubber gloves, again, that's a John Pothia tip, and it's worked well for me. A wet glove is even better. I can find I could do this in the dark. Right here I can feel I didn't sand this yet. Now another thing, I don't want to, now that I've radiused all these edges are completely radiused. Every time I've sanded it, I do not want to sand through on the edge if I can. So I'll just give them a light, if I do this demo once, and if I see any indication in the sandpaper I'm going through, stop. And if you do go through, the trick is if you do go through, touch it up with a little tiny brush and let it sit for an hour. Because we're going to re-clear this today, sometime today, assuming that the weather doesn't change or anything. But so what I've gone from in this little couple minute session, I could feel these ridges like going over a railroad track. I don't want to feel them in the final process. The same with decals. I don't want to feel decals. I want this to be as if this was just one big smooth surface. And when I get to that point, and again, it looks like the 1200 is cutting pretty good. But what I'm doing is, as I'm using up all my old sandpaper, excuse me, as I'm using the sandpaper up, I'm replacing it with that Indasa, the red stuff, and that's Rhino Wet or whatever you want to call it. That stuff has worked great. Anyway, I'm going to sand this whole part down. It's probably going to take a half an hour or so, maybe 45 minutes. That'll get me into a couple degrees warmer outside. We'll prep up all the parts and then hopefully get dressed for the Yukon and go on tour of the Yukon out there with a spray gun. Another good tip, just before I forget this, because I had told Turbo Steve this. He was sanding in the shop the other day, and I noticed he let this dry out. It's always good to get rid of the residue and don't let it dry in the final finish. And that's a really good lesson to learn. Is constantly keep it dry. It also lets you see. Now let's see if we can see this if you can see where this is dead flat and where it's got like an orange peely effect. So that information that I just put on the video is, if you understand that part of it, you're a long ways toward having a great finish. That is a critical part of a good finish. That last sand out before the last coat of clear. Or the last 2 coats of clear. We'll see. Now in the course of sanding out the part, it's not unusual to go through on any areas. There's always an area that's just a little crooked because these are plastic parts and they're 30 years old. So we want to straighten that out now. So if I go through, I can just touch this up. I always have the gun sitting there with the exact paint that's in there. I just got to make sure it's mixed. But it's not, if I get 2 or 3 little touch-up spots before that final coat of clear, that's less chance that I'm going to buff through and get them. So I really want to be careful, of course. But if I do go through on a corner or an edge or some little spot, I can just back mask it and touch it up. It's not unusual, and you shouldn't feel like right now if you go through it's a big tragedy, because what it is, it picked up a spot that you would have gone through probably while you're buffing it out with the buffing wheel, and then it would be 3 times as much work. This is kind of a pay me now. In fact, here I've gone through in a corner here. I'll touch that up and you'll probably never see it, but just the point, I didn't want to give the impression like that never happens. In fact, it actually happens all the time. And you're learning how to deal with it is a part of getting these old finishes to be perfect. I always want to emphasize about any paint related things, there's a million different ways to paint. I can only share with you, or with the people that enjoy watching YouTube, the things I've learned in my lifetime. I've learned them from a lot of very highly qualified people, and they've all been willing to share, and I've been more than happy. If you can learn something from my experience, that's great. But I would say the one lesson that overcomes all others is just go out and buy some paint and start painting. If you want to paint, you'll learn quickly. You'll learn how to set a gun. You'll learn how to do the wet sanding. There's plenty of videos that show other ways of doing it. I'm only showing my way, and my way has worked pretty well for me. Now, as I've told Steve, I always feel it's really important to sand a little bit, get the thing dry. Constantly change the towel that you're working on, because the towel is going to absorb all this schmutz that comes off here, ultimately winds up on the part or on your hands or on your shirt or whatever. That's why we have this an endless supply of towels here and a washing machine. Anyway, what I do right now, and this is all critical stuff, once it's dry, I want to look this over carefully for any little shiny spots. And bingo, I just happen to see one. If I can show this, it's right here. That's what I call a moon crater. This right here is an edge that needs a little more sanding. There's little shiny spots in there. I don't know if you can see them, because again, this camera, this has a terrible macro lens. So I'll do some more sanding here. Wherever I see it shiny, I want to sand it. The odds are good I'm going to go through, which I've done already. I wanted to show it. Not to worry, we'll back mask off the black temporarily and just hit that with the yellow that's already in the gun. We don't even have to put it in the gun. So this is the point at which you got to be fussier and fussier as you get to the top layer of finish, because to get that look that it's just made out of glass and just perfectly buffed, all these little imperfections and dots and dots, they would be a lot less if you had a spray booth. But nobody I know has a spray booth. You got to kind of tough it out. And these lessons that I'm sharing, you can do the quality work as the highest quality guy in the world. Can't do any better with a spray booth. He can just do it a little bit easier. One of the things I always say is, and when I'm trying to help somebody learn the skill of painting that I've been lucky enough to learn from other people, so all I'm really doing is passing on what I've learned from people that have been in this business or been hobbyists or both. And the point is to, at this point in time, this is the point where I think most people, including myself, if you skip a step, later on you're sorry, because if I see any shiny spots on this, I'm going to go back. In fact, I see a shiny spot right there. This part of it I can do over and over and over, and I'm waiting for it to warm up a little bit out there, but so far it doesn't look like it's getting really warm. And Karen has got this this dream of putting up the Christmas tree today. We had a wonderful Thanksgiving with the family, and we're ready to start celebrating. So any spot I can see on this that needs more work, this is the point you don't want to rush it. When you rush this step of the final sand out before the final coat of clear or the final coats of clear, that's where you really pay for it. And if you don't do all the little touch-ups and all the little things that go with it, somewhere a year later you're looking at it and you go, why didn't I just spend that extra 10 minutes and do it right? Now, I've gone through this part carefully. I've got several touch-up spots, which is normal for me. And I guess that if you don't have any touch-up spots, I guess maybe you didn't sand enough. I don't know. In my whole time I've been doing this, I've never been able to get a really prize-winning finish and without going through several times. So now we do have spots here, little spots in the front, little spot here. But the part, notice the key part, the part is dead flat. There's not one shiny little pinhole anywhere. This, so when that last coat of clear or coats, I'm going to see if it needs 2 coats or 1. And again, I don't want to turn it into decoupage where I have 1/8 of an inch of finish. I want it to be as flat and thin as possible. This is just a quick dirty backmasking because we're not going to spray anyways near this, so I don't have to really worry about that edge. Most of the work is going to be in the 2 corners. But this is handy to have for this kind of a job. And this is the 3M tape you can buy in Lowe's, the Sure Release multi-surface, because it's not real sticky. So I wouldn't want to use this on, you know, if we were painting this edge, I put the fine line tape down first, of course. So even if I do get a little spray up there, overspray, it won't be a problem. But this is good for a quick and dirty back mask. So I just got the paint's already in the gun. I got to see if it's warm enough out there. I don't freeze to death when I go out there. So a good tip is before you do a touch-up, give it a couple of sprays. It's the same paint we painted the fender with, so it should be a pretty good match. I'll wait about 20 minutes, give that a second and a third coat. While that part is drying, the challenge of all the stuff you do when you try to do it on a budget and try to do it without a spray booth and without a $1 million inventory of equipment and the world's loudest compressor, and you still get it done. That's the amazing part. And then you go and see somebody who's got access to a body shop and all the high-tech stuff, and and it's a tie. I don't know. Anyway, the Bondo that we used, that 4C Bondo, that stuff worked great. So okay, so now I'm tack ragging this down while another thing that's always important is the efficiency of doing this. While one thing is drying, you work on something else, because I only have this limited window of about 4 hours a day, and to be honest, there's a lot of other stuff to do around here. So Karen does keep me busy, there's no doubt about it, and Miles, of course. So I'm going to go shoot. This is going to need at least 3 coats of white. I'll shoot the first coat of white. While that's drying, I'll go flip back to the yellow, put the second coat of touch-up yellow, back and forth, and this is going to be like a leapfrog game. Try to get as much of this stuff into the garage drying before the weather changes. It's supposed to snow this afternoon. This is one of the secret weapons of all body shops. Just drink enough coffee. Now what this is going to require is about a 20-minute wait here. Second and third coat of white. I want to have, because what I want is for Steve to have the ability the day we do the striping, and he's not picked out the final paint job yet. I want him to have all the choices for the striping, and we got plenty of new striping tape, so it's really up to him. So see how he'd like to do it. He already bought the paint. It's red, black, and white. So that has to go out into the garage to dry. It'll dry overnight, if not more, and it looks like we've beat whatever bad weather is coming this way. Now for the fender. Karen just ran out to tell me I got about another 2 hours before the nasty weather's getting here. So I'm going to get a little speed on here. So while we're working on Steve's parts, I looked around if there's any other white touch-ups I need to do. Not right now. but I would like to get the clear on this, so I've got to pull the back masking off and get out there before the weather goes bad. So while I'm grinding out the yardage, Karen is cooking up
vegetables.
Roasting vegetables. Wow. One coat of clear on these and they'll be ready to go. Wow, they look great. Boy, are we going to be healthy. We'll probably live to be 50, 60 years old. Wow, who knows? That's very nice.
It's for hummus, beet hummus. These are roasted potatoes. This is roasted Brussels sprouts. And these are roasted heirloom tomatoes that are going to go on top of pizza.
I might live forever. Well, not really. But this will help. Back to the salt mines. Roasted vegetables. Ah, what could be better? Roasted body parts for motorcycles. Anyway, the weather's holding up a little bit out there, but it's really getting colder than I thought. I'm going to get a couple coats of clear. At least one coat, maybe two on this. You know, all the touch-ups are done. And this is the brand of clear we've been using for, well, I guess the last couple of years with pretty good results. And the fast hardener seems to work best under these shop conditions. So this was a pretty productive day, and we did beat the snow or rain or whatever the hell's coming. I got some extra clear on these parts that came out real nice. So I hope you got some good information off the video and you've enjoyed watching us work, and thanks for watching. And most of all, thanks for keeping some of these older bikes alive that maybe if we didn't restore them, they'd be in a dumpster. Again, thanks for watching.